Anthony Ryan. I am the Assistant Superintendent of Schools for the Hampshire Regional School District. For those of you familiar with Western Massachusetts, that's about 90 miles due west. It's a pleasure to be here. I also have the distinct honor of being Chairman of the Board of Advisors for the Massachusetts Committee of Stressfree Schools. This afternoon you will be introduced what the New York Times has called one of the best ideas of 2005, consciousness-based education, the foundation of which is the Transcendental Meditation technique, which has been proven to be an exceptionally effective in enhancing the learning and reducing stress of students. The Transcendental Meditation Program in the learning environment has far-reaching effects, as you will learn today. We have a wonderful host of speakers, people that have a depth and breadth of experience that I'm sure you will thoroughly enjoy. To introduce these individuals, I would like to call on Bob Roth. Bob is the member of the Board of Advisors for the Committee for Stress-Free Schools and the Vice President of the David Lynch Foundation for Consciousness-Based Education and World Peace. He is also a noted author and a wonderful public speaker. So I'd like to introduce Bob Roth.
Does the Boston Globe carry the cartoon strip called Opus? Yeah. The penguin. So, 2 weeks ago, the cartoonist wrote, the father is talking to Augie and he said, "Augie, your new drug regimen is ready. This should take care of your ADHD, OCD, BADD, sloppy homework disorder, adolescent obnoxious disorder, hugging deficit disorder, clarinet lesson panic disorder, anti-broccoli barfing hysteria disorder, bad grades, bad pants, general disorder, and zits." And I laughed, and then I had a thought that we probably all have, and that is, there is truth in humor. And if it's true, which I believe it is, that, as the Surgeon General said, America is swimming in an ocean of stress, then it's also very true that our children are drowning in it. 10 million children on antidepressant medication. 4 to 5 million children diagnosed with learning disorders. The number 3 cause of death among teenagers, suicide. There is a crisis in our schools that demands a substantive solution. We're very happy, honored to be here with all of you at the Harvard Club as a guest of the Massachusetts Committee for Stress-Free Schools to take the next 6 or 7 hours. No, just kidding. The next hour or two to present very substantial research and classroom experience on the use of a simple, natural, effortless meditation technique that any child from the age of 10 can learn as easily and as effectively as any PhD or Nobel laureate. It is that natural to everyone. What I'm going to do is give a few definition of terms. We're going to see a 5-minute news spot that aired on the Today Show, NBC Today Show, about a charter school in Detroit where Transcendental Meditation has been used for the last 7 years. So actually, before I give you the definition and then turn this over to Dr. John Hagelin, who's really the head of all of these programs in the country, if we could go to this 5-minute news spot, that'll really give you a vision right away of what it is we're talking about, and then we're off and running. So I'd just like to say thank you all for coming, and this should be a very enjoyable afternoon.
Well, now there's a school in Detroit that's helping students deal with this stress in a unique way. Here's NBC's Kevin Tibbles.
The boisterous kids at Detroit's Nataki Taliba School are really no different than any others, except perhaps for 10 minutes twice a day when all they hear is silence. These students aren't napping, they're meditating. Transcendental meditation was brought to the West 40 years ago by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and made popular by the Beatles in the late 60s. And today, it's used in this school as a stress buster.
It's not a religion, it's not a philosophy, it's not a way of life. It's simply a mental technique. It allows the system, the mind and the body to settle down and gain a very, very deep rest.
According to these kids, it helps.
I have a tendency to dwell on things that happened in the past, but when I meditate, then it helps me let them go.
I just pay attention better now.
After meditation, I feel great.
When we think of packing our kids off to school these days, we often worry about the problems: high stress, substance abuse, even violence, things that threaten a child's education. But can 10 minutes of quiet time really make a difference? The research says yes. The University of Michigan followed 140 of the school's 10 to 14-year-olds.
They felt more connected, they felt happier, satisfied, peaceful, calm.
I used to get angry a lot, but now it's like I'm calming down.
And studies show meditating kids actually do better in school than kids who don't.
My grade point average has went up a lot, from a 3.4 to a 3.8. Now I'm doing much better. I've evolved. At first in science, I got a B, but now my grade is up to an A.
And when your grades are that good, who cares what your skeptical friends think?
They just think it's the weirdest thing in the world, because my best friend said that they wouldn't be able to sit that still for maybe 3 seconds, but they just tell them that's the best thing.
For today, Kevin Tibbles, NBC News, Detroit.
And joining us now is Nataki Taliba School Principal Carmen Anamdi. Carmen, good morning to you.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. Did this start out as a way to boost scores, or was your goal simply to get the kids focused?
No, I learned to meditate about 30 years ago, and that was really the first time that I ever started thinking about stress and the impact that stress has on our behavior. So I thought, why not introduce this to 10-year-olds? If you've noticed now as adults, we're all in the bookstores getting the self-help books, and every time you read one, you think, gee, I wish somebody had told me this when I was 10. So really, that was my desire, is to really begin to make them aware of stress and how stress impacts on your behavior.
Well, they're clearly calm as I look at them behind you there. I'm wondering if this was a tough sell to the parents. Does transcendental meditation have a religious connotation, for example, to some folks?
No, not at all. We began the program 6 years ago, and there were 180 students at the time. There were only 8 families that did not allow their children to participate in the program. And I think it's the word meditation. I think that people associate that with religion, but there's absolutely no beliefs. That's why I like the technique. It doesn't impose on any of your beliefs or your lifestyle or anything. It's just a physical technique.
And I guess there are misconceptions I had when I heard I was doing this segment. I went, did the hum. And that's not part of it. We saw those kids in absolute silence in the tape.
No. There isn't even any concentration. It's really a very free-flowing thing. I don't like anything that causes me to have to alter myself. The only discipline that this requires is that you do it every day. You know how you look in the mirror and you say, gee, I'm not physically fit, and so you go and exercise and you think that'll make you physically fit? No, not for that day. You have to do it over a period of time
Carmen,
to really see any benefit.
This is not cheap. I know you've had some donations, some grants to the school, but it's an expensive proposition for most schools, I would think.
Oh, that's true. Yes, Chrysler, the Daimler Chrysler Foundation is the one that really initiated the program for us, and then General Motors also began to be one of our sponsors. But, you know, that's the way it is in this country. Anything that's healthy for us is expensive. It's like health care.
Hey, are the teachers doing this too?
The teachers do this too. We found that there were some studies that have been done across the nation that say that only 1 out of 4 teachers remains in the profession, and I think that's scary. And I think part of it is because teaching is a very demanding profession, very stressful, and so I'm glad to offer it as a health benefit.
Well, Carmen and Amdi, thanks so much for coming on and talking about this.
Thank you.
So here's a Here's a working definition. What transcendental meditation is and is not. Then we'll know what we're talking about as the afternoon and early evening progresses. No, honest. Transcendental meditation, a simple, means not complicated, simple, easily learned. As I said, any child from the age of 10, even an ADHD kid who couldn't close his or her eyes and sit quietly for 30 seconds on their own, can learn to do this and do it for 10 minutes easily and effortlessly. So it's simple, it's easy, it's natural. There's no manipulation. This is not hypnosis. This is not suggestion. We're not teaching any philosophy or anything. It's a mechanical technique, effortless, that's practiced for 10 minutes twice a day, once in the morning and at the beginning of the school day, at the end of the school day, sitting comfortably in a chair with the eyes closed. What it's not a religion. People of all religions practice transcendental meditation. It's not a philosophy. Not a philosophy, you learn a technique. It doesn't involve a change in lifestyle. And then briefly, what happens? The active thinking mind, our normal active thinking mind, I like it, the gotta do this mind, gotta go here, gotta, all the different things that are going on all the time in our mind from the minute we wake, gotta. The active thinking mind is like the waves on an ocean. Sometimes choppier, sometimes less, but the active thinking mind during this very specific technique of transcendental meditation, not some vague thing, a specific technique, allows the mind to settle down, quiet down. And we experience quieter levels of the mind, and then we experience, they use the term pure consciousness, perfectly settled, wide awake, silent level of the mind. Like the silent depths of the ocean. Here's the point. That's who we are. TM doesn't create that. It's in there. It's part of us. That settled level of the mind was there yesterday, it was there 2 years ago, it was there 10 years ago, it was there 50 years ago if we were alive, and it's going to be there tomorrow, and it's going to be there. It's part of us. We've lost access to it. Transcendental meditation is a simple mechanical technique that allows anyone to dive within and experience that, and as the mind quiets down, the body quiets down, and that is my introduction to our speaker, next speaker, and the person who will host the rest of the afternoon. I'm a writer, so I'm going to put a little footnote in here, sort of thing. During this session, you're going to hear about transcendental meditation. The actual instruction is several hours of personal instruction over several days. This is not meditation light, L-I-T-E. This is something where you learn it from personal instruction and you have a follow-up program and children are mentored in it or tutored in it as long as they're in school. Simple and easy, but we have a follow-up program. So what we're going to do is you're going to hear about this from many different avenues. And the person who's going to sort of lead you on that journey, I'm very honored to have with us today in his incredibly busy schedule, Dr. John Hagelin, who what we're talking about, the use of transcendental meditation in the schools, all the enormous amount of research that's been done on TM, and the mainstreaming of meditation in America, really you look to Dr. John Hagelin for his work in this over the last 30 years. Dr. Hagelin is a world-renowned quantum physicist. He's an educator, author, and science and public policy expert. Dr. Hagelin has conducted pioneering research at the European Center for Particle Physics and the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, and is responsible for the development of a highly successful grand unified field theory based on the superstring. He promised not to go into too much on that. In addition, Dr. Hagelin has spent much of the past quarter century leading a scientific investigation into the foundations of human consciousness. His research shows how, through educational programs that develop human consciousness, it is possible to overcome acute societal problems. Dr. Hagelin received his PhD from Harvard University in 1981. He is currently Director of the Institute of Science, Technology, and Public Policy and Professor of Physics at Maharishi University of Management. Would you please welcome Dr. John Hagelin.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be back in Boston. It's a pleasure to be back at the Harvard Club of Boston. Thank you very, very much for coming and sharing the next 9 hours with us. We have such an extraordinary array of brilliant, experienced speakers and scientists who are involved with programs in their own classrooms, in their own schools, to share with you. We're going to move ahead very, very quickly. I won't say too much more by nature of introduction, because that was very nicely covered a moment ago. But I will say, medically, we are living in an epidemic of stress. For 3 decades now, there has been a steady rise in stress-related illness, stroke, hypertension, heart disease. And societally, we're living in a highly stressed place, and most disease is caused or complicated by stress. Stress and high blood pressure and high blood pressure-induced heart disease. High blood pressure used to be an adult disease, and stress-related illnesses used to be adult illnesses. Now these stress-related illnesses and stress-related learning disorders, as we will see, are afflicting children at younger and younger ages. Some of the most extraordinary research that we will present very briefly today to you is reducing high blood pressure among students. By the way, when students already exhibit signs of hypertension, that student statistically is more or less doomed to a life of chronic heart disease, a short life of chronic heart disease. If you can prevent and reverse high blood pressure in students and give them the stress coping skills to prevent that and all other stress-related illnesses, that is a very, very precious tool to give to our children. And when it comes to health, the Transcendental Meditation Program is certainly the most widely researched, certainly most extensively practiced, and broadly prescribed by doctors of any program in the world non-pharmacological approach to reducing stress and stress-related illness. So in terms of preventing disease and coping with stress, meditation has really become mainstream. And it is extraordinary, the phenomenon that this has become in the last 1 to several years, especially hundreds of schools, thousands worldwide, have incorporated Transcendental Meditation for a few minutes, morning and evening, into the educational routine with, as we will hear, absolutely extraordinary results. This has been in public schools as well as private, charter, and parochial schools. What excites me even more, though, than in equipping our children with the very potent stress coping skills to prevent stress-related illness is the effect of meditation on the mind and on learning. Meditation is, after all, a mental practice, a mental technique, and all these incredible physiological effects of it are really side effects, physiological side effects of what's happening in the mind. When the body gains a level of rest 3 times deeper than sleep, and in just a few minutes, it's because the mind, as Bob said, is settling down very, very deeply. Quietly, it just slips into a state of profound inner silence and contentment, where the student or individual experiences their quiet inner nature, very content, very calm, and that contentness and calm begins to be more stable, more pervasive. As we'll see in a few minutes, in just a moment actually, the transformation that takes place in the brain is precious and extraordinary. The brain experiences a profound transformation which can be seen using various different brain imaging technologies, but even very simply in the EEG, the electrical activity of the brain, becomes profoundly coherent. The brain becomes extremely orderly and calm. Balance is restored to the brain physiology, and this orderly brain functioning is deeply correlated with stability, IQ, creativity, etc. We'll see everything good about the brain depends on its orderly functioning. And now orderly brain functioning, restoration of physiological balance and neurological balance, this can be developed longitudinally in any student of any age, any culture or background, in fact in any adult. Orderly brain functioning, and with it IQ, creativity, etc., develop measurably and longitudinally. This is an extraordinary educational tool, not just there for reducing stress, but for really systematically developing the full potential of our brains. And that's why, as an educator, I'm so excited, why I ultimately went from Stanford University, where I taught, to Maharishi University of Management in Iowa, which was an unusual career decision. I intended to do that for a couple of years, perhaps, and for 20-something years I have been there. I can't leave the place. It's just such an incredible place to teach, because the students, as we'll also see, we have a very sort of open and generous admissions policy. If you apply and you're not severely deranged, you're accepted. And yet, by the time the students have been in this educational institution for a number of years, they consistently score as a class in the top 1% of the schools in the nation. Not because they were brilliant to begin with, but we have a technique that really allows the students to blossom and removes a lot of the baggage and the stress that people carry around, particularly in our cities, that prevents a student from blossoming. So I am very excited to introduce a series of speakers who will present very concisely really, really important information, scientific and direct personal experience in the classroom, of what this simple curriculum addition of a few minutes of structured, quiet time that provides much deeper rest than sleep, using a technique that is, on the one hand, very ancient, the oldest known tradition of meditation on earth, but now also very modern, because this meditation approach has become the intense focus of modern scientific research. 700 studies have now been published at 200 different universities and research institutes in 35 countries on the profound practical benefits, psychological, educational, physiological, even sociological benefits of this technique to remove the deleterious effects of stress and to restore balance and physiological functioning. So to begin to share that research and experience with you, it's a great joy to introduce Dr. Alaric Aranander, probably the most extensively experienced published author in the world on the effects of meditation and brain development. He is the director of the Brain Research Institute and an expert on the neurobiology of brain development and mind-body health among children and adolescents. Dr. Alaric Aranander has conducted pioneering brain research at the University of California at Los Angeles, Penn State University at Hershey, the University of Wisconsin at Madison, and at Maharishi University of Management in Fairfield, Iowa. Dr. Alaric Aranander.
Good afternoon. It's a joy to be with you. I very greatly appreciate Massachusetts Committee for Stressfree Schools to invite me to tell you something about the brain in this consideration of our children. There's a crisis in education, and that crisis has everything to do about how we treat the human brain. In the last 50 years of extensive brain research, I'd like to share with you in the next few minutes what science thinks about the problem and offers as a solution. As a short overview, there are 4 things I think you should know about the brain and education. First, there's hope. Modern research shows that the brain can change. Any brain can change. Therefore, you can hope for the best students to get better and for the worst students to get better too. The second thing you should know is that this neuroplasticity is quite extensive throughout the brain, especially the prefrontal cortex, right in front here, right up front, right behind your forehead. This is the prefrontal cortex. It's your CEO. It's the CEO developing in every one of your students. It's that part of the brain that makes us human, or as human as we could possibly become. The third thing from modern science, research has shown that for your prefrontal cortex to come fully online and be very powerful in its ability to make us good, productive, and happy citizens requires the coupling or the integration between all the different cells, this side and this side, the front and the back. The coupling or the coherence or integration of these brain cells needs to be encouraged and enlivened, and that will bring about full human development. And finally, with that hope, and with that prefrontal cortex working more coherently, there is a technology scientifically demonstrated in a very simple way to create the maximum coherence in your prefrontal cortex and across the entire human brain, to bring about maximum human development and offer you and every child the opportunity to escape this epidemic of stress and become fully developed. So with that overview, just a quick few slides showing you the research. The human brain. It comes in many flavors and colors, but healthy brains are the issues. We have healthy feet, we have healthy hearts, we have healthy stomachs. We want healthy brains. Here is a brain, and this is what happens in every classroom for every student. The student is exposed to some piece of information. And you'll see in this picture, in the very front, the chartreuse area, the yellow area behind the forehead, that is the prefrontal cortex. And in a moment you'll see exactly why it is so important. But when information comes into the child's environment, it immediately moves through the senses into the brain, the gateway. It gets processed very quickly in a very dynamic form into an object. The child now knows you said the word cat. But that's just the beginning. Is that child awake? Does that child care? What will the child do with that word? And how will it impact its value systems and motivations and its learning? And that is your prefrontal cortex, this yellow area up front here, diagrammatic. This is your CEO. It creates the plan for the next moment, for the next day, for your lifetime. And that plan is then, over the next moment and lifetime, executed, activated, and you engage that moment of learning and you engage your life with all its possibilities. You'll notice that the CEO is at the core of this whole process that goes on perpetually, day and night. This is the core of the learning process. This is why the CEO is so important. The CEO is the fundamental aspect of the learning educational experience. The question is the CEO functioning in a coherent way, in an orderly, progressive way, or an incoherent way? Is it coherent, integrated, or incoherent? This is the key. And it's the prefrontal cortex which we want to focus on because it is the one that makes us most human with all those great qualities. The next slide would indicate that the question about the CEO is how much it is actually online. Everybody has a CEO. The question is, how functional is it? The analogy here is with computer technology. When we had dial-up some time ago, some faint memory of dial-up, we thought we were hot stuff. We thought, oh, we're connected to the universe. I can do emails, I can download stuff. This is great. Now, if you think about dial-up, it's like some bad dream. You don't want to even think that we actually did dial-up at some point. And actually, broadband and DSL is only the beginning of what we're going to be able to accomplish, not only technology, but in the human brain. So the question is, being online is a relative consideration. How much online is a consideration? And of course, it takes about 25 years under the best circumstances to get anybody's CEO online. And those 25 years are those precious years that education has to help that happen. And if you ask your students, what are the responsibilities of their CEO? What are your responsibilities of your CEO? They fall into these categories. Your prefrontal cortex, your CEO, is your sense of self. It means, are your students awake? Do they have self-confidence?
Do they have self-esteem? Is somebody in your classroom ready and willing to listen to you? What about the values? Prefrontal cortex structures your values. What are the values of the child? Does it care to be in classroom? Does it think is any worthwhile time being spent in the classroom? Or is he dreaming and daydreaming about after school? Once you have values structured by your CEO, what are the motivations? Will the child participate in your lesson plan? Is he motivated to actually engage the knowledge that you've prepared for him or her? And then decision making. In class, we keep structuring opportunities to make decisions. And as the CEO comes more and more online, those decisions become more mature and more comprehensive and more life-supporting and less risky. And then finally, self-control. A 2-year-old has very little self-control, but most of us outgrow that. And as we do outgrow that, we become less impulsive, less reactive, more thoughtful, more comprehensive in our ability to take what we want and move forward with it. Meditation, transcendental meditation, has been shown by basic research and research done in academic and educational institutions to give rise to a very simple, deep, profound, coherent experience for anybody. And that gives rise to a coherent CEO, which in turn will automatically create a more coherent pattern of thinking and behavior. Whatever you put into the system is what you will get out of the system. If you put coherence and orderliness into the brain and its experiencing function, you will get that out in the classroom. So 10 minutes of meditation in the early morning create a liveliness in the brain fabric that when the child now sits in the class afterwards, they will be more available to learn. Stress, unfortunately, takes the CEO offline. Stress and accumulative stress from many sources actually dumbs us down. Stress takes us more and more offline. Alcohol is one of the most powerful ways our society has developed to handle that growing stress. Kids from the age of 3rd grade and onwards have considerable use of alcohol. It's socially accepted. But did you know that alcohol actually damages the CEO? Happy hour, the use of alcohol, is only a tool to gain relief, not to solve any problem. It just turns off your CEO so you forget about your problems. You have not solved them at all. At the same time of forgetting about them and having a momentary relief, you're actually damaging and taking your CEO offline. Not a useful approach. So stress damages our sense of self, the values of our students. They don't develop properly spontaneously. The motivations are crippled. Decisions become more and more risky and life-damaging, and self-control is lost. Transcendental meditation is a time-tested, extensively researched, and very, very practical approach. Here is a picture on the left-hand side of a modeled brain person, and you can see there are little lines between these dots. The dots are sensors to measure the brain wave. The intensity of the color, red in this case, is an indication of how coupled or coherent or integrated one area is with another area, either nearby or at a distance. And you can see that in the prefrontal cortex of this individual, at that moment, their brain is, you could say, relatively, somewhat, a little bit, minimally connected. However, if that individual was to practice the Transcendental Meditation technique, 40 years of research now demonstrate a remarkable shift from a lack of coherence to very high, sustainable, and beneficial levels of EEG coherence, not only in the prefrontal cortex, our CEO, the CEO of every child, but throughout the entire brain. Total brain functioning for total creative potential development. And here is a summary. It may be a little small in your viewing, but if you have a lot of coherence, and this happens through the TM technique, in your CEO, then starting with the upper right, students will be automatically more creative. They'll have more inner orientation and self-esteem. They'll have greater self-development than the average American citizen. They will have less anxiety. They will perform better in school without so much struggle and effort. They'll have more awareness, more neuromuscular efficiency and reflexes. They'll be able to compute things better, more intelligent. They won't be so darn crazy. They'll be more emotionally stable, don't have so many highs, up and lows. They'll just be more easy in this life we have. They'll be able to see and understand and imbibe bigger concepts, more abstract issues. And finally, they'll spontaneously grow in ethical and moral behavior. Not a teachable subject, something that is imbibed in the nature of a growing prefrontal cortex if you give it a chance to become coherent. So, healthy brains are coherent brains. And if you wish to have coherent, healthy brains of your students, then modern science has shown, brain research has shown, that effective education can come about through the implementation of this one simple program to make, to nourish, to complement all your existing programs. And that is the Transcendental Meditation Technique. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alaric, for that. I'm tempted to just mention one thing. This increased EEG coherence that we saw so remarkably demonstrated means that the whole brain is functioning in concert. You don't feel like you're so scattered. All the different areas of the mind and personality are working more together. And especially that means the CEO of the brain, which is our rational filter against primitive, impulsive, aggressive, violent behavior. That rational filter comes online, and we can see and evaluate and plan and judge and have some control over our behavior, which is the opposite of what you find, for example, in stress-related learning disorders and ADHD and students who are developing too slowly. But I thought I would share, since the research was done at Harvard here, one of many studies that have been done just adding this brief period of deep rest and orderly brain functioning in maximum security prisons, including Walpole Prison nearby, San Quentin, prisons all over the world. In a correctional facility, maximum security prison, you tend to find underdevelopment of the brain and lots of what are called functional holes in our CEO, the critical prefrontal cortex. We saw an example of what that looked like in the alcohol-abusing brain that we saw a few moments ago. But it means there are large areas within the critical prefrontal cortex where the brain, they're not really holes, but just areas of the brain that are not functioning, where the neurons aren't firing. When that happens, particularly in the prefrontal cortex, the CEO is offline, and you lose the so-called higher brain. What is left is the primitive brain. And there is no rational filter against primitive, aggressive, impulsive, violent behavior, and hence the violent behavior that pervades the prisons. In prisons, you find a remarkable reversal of that severe metabolic imbalance. Because the meditative experience, which is the maximally expanded state of human comprehension, holistic comprehension, is unique among all human experiences. And only that meditative state engages the total brain. So that the entire brain, the frontal and occipital lobes, the temporal, the parietal lobes, the left and right hemisphere of the brain, the whole brain functions in concert, and the CEO is online and connected. After a little bit of that, a few months of regular meditation, those functional holes in the brain fill in, and the whole brain in the CEO comes online. The bottom line, ultimately, for a prison administrator is the rate of return to prison. The recidivism rate drops precipitously, as we've seen in all these studies. And I'll share one quick experience in Senegal, in Africa. They had a severe prison crisis, severe prison overcrowding resulting in almost daily riots. And the reason for the severe prison overcrowding was that, for whatever reason, the rate of return to prison there was 90% high, even by U.S. standards. Which, by the way, confirms what we already know about prisons. Whatever's going on in there ain't rehabilitation. Some people say that's where you get your PhD in crime. But after about 12 weeks of voluntary instruction in TM, because the Minister of Justice was desperate and thought he would try anything, and he tried this. Everyone had learned, all the guards and all the inmates, this spread like wildfire because it produced profound relief in those pressure cookers of stress. In another 16 weeks, 16 to say 22 weeks, the rate of return to prison had already dropped from 90% to 6%. And within 3 more months, a third of the prisons had closed due to lack of repeat customers. There's an incredible videotape that we have for the interested viewer where the Minister of Justice of Senegal is on national television at a podium. The president is seated nearby, and he's weeping on national television saying how this one simple voluntary intervention has completely transformed criminal justice in that country and the whole quality of life of the country by reducing crime so markedly. If that is the result of people with advanced metabolic dysfunction in the brain, how much better would it be to take a preventative approach and give our young people an opportunity to maintain neurological balance and to promote brain development before they ever have to confront the criminal justice system at all? That's why I'm a big believer in education. Our next speaker is one of the world's greatest experts in the medical physiological benefits of meditation, and that is Dr. Gary Kaplan. Very happy he could come. He is a neurologist and former director of clinical neurophysiology at North Shore University Hospital and clinical associate professor of neurology at New York University School of Medicine. Dr. Kaplan received the Albert H. Douglas Award from the Medical Society of the State of New York for outstanding achievements as a clinical teacher interested in promoting and improving the medical education of physicians. Dr. Kaplan is also a medical consultant on the health benefits, as I said, of Transcendental Meditation Program for students and children. Dr. Gary Kaplan, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hagelin, and thank you for inviting me up here to Boston. You've heard a lot about the Transcendental Meditation technique, what it can do. I thought I'd spend a few minutes talking to you about the research that's been done, very exciting research all over the world, in fact. Research that's been done in children, adolescents in particular, in adults, even in senior citizens, about how this simple mental technique can affect health. As we've heard during the Transcendental Meditation technique, the mind settles down. We actually experience thought at finer and finer, subtler and subtler levels of the mind until we go beyond that conscious thinking and arrive at this state in which we're maximally alert. We're very awake inside, but at the same time the body is enjoying a very deep physiological rest, in many ways deeper than even that deep rest we get during deep sleep. So here we have a fourth major state of consciousness. We all know about the 3 states of consciousness that we all experience: waking, sleeping, and dreaming. Here's a 4th state of consciousness that's different from waking, sleeping, or dreaming because it's a state of rest and maximal alertness at the same time. No other state is quite like this, where the body enjoys this deep decrease in metabolic activity, deep rest, and yet the mind is fully alert. And as Dr. Aronander showed us, this has profound effects in terms of the brain physiology and this coherent or synchronous functioning between left and right and back and front parts of the brain. Why would that affect our health? And Dr. Hagelin mentioned before about these studies that have been done showing decrease in hypertension and other positive physiological effects. The reason it affects our health, our physical health, so much, and why we're so interested in it as physicians and want to recommend this to our patients and also to young people, students, is because the mind and the body, as we all know, are intimately related. What happens in the mind has a direct effect on our physiology. And what happens in the mind is just the effect of what brain activity is going on. And in particular, what brain activity is involving that prefrontal cortex and how it affects the rest of the brain, and then subsequently how it affects the physiology. So because the two are so intimately connected, when we get that deep physiological rest and we have that coherent brain functioning, the physiology starts to perform more the way that it was intended to perform. And the stresses and strains of our daily activity don't have the same impact that they would have otherwise. So with this regular practice of this transcendental meditation technique, those stresses and strains are thrown off. The physiology works more like a fine-tuned machine, the way it should be working. And naturally, those trends towards ill health, which we see beginning even in adolescence, like high blood pressure, heart disease, hardening of the arteries, naturally those start to reverse. So much so that we've seen in the research, and this was published in the American Journal of Hypertension, that adolescents in high school, starting the TM technique, after only 2 to 3 months of regular practice, have significant, measurable levels of decrease in high blood pressure in those students who had high blood pressure to begin with. So normalization of blood pressure, and it doesn't require years and years of practice and going up to some mountain. No. Very simple, 10 to 20 minutes in the morning and the evening. What other things are affected? We mentioned hypertension, and there's been a lot of research on that. Decrease in heart disease. In the psychological realm, and this has been alluded to already, increase in creativity as reported in the Journal of Creative Behavior, improved memory as reported in a peer-reviewed study in the Journal of Memory and Cognition, and the list goes on. Improved brain functioning, using those hidden reserves. Psychologists say we might use 10 to 15% of our total brain potential. Now we're starting to use more of it with each and every day and week and month that we practice the TM technique regularly, and this has been reported, and again, in peer-reviewed, scientifically reviewed studies in the Journal of Psychosomatic Medicine, in the Journal of Human Physiology, in the Journal of Physiology and Behavior. Decreased levels of anxiety, as can be measured on standard psychological tests. This along with, it's not just that, oh, well, I meditated and my hypertension got better. No, all at the same time. This is a holistic technique, again, because it's affording the brain and the physiology a new style of functioning, which is going to have effects across the board. Increased neuromuscular integration, decreased insomnia as reported in the Journal of Counseling and Development, reduced alcohol abuse, reduced cigarette abuse, cigarette smoking, reduced illness and medical expenditure. This is one of the most important, not only for the youth of this country, but also for all of us as we're aging. And meta-analysis have been done looking at use of doctors' visits, inpatient and outpatient treatments, and finding that people who practice the TM technique regularly, as would be expected, as all of these negative trends in terms of the physiology tend to fall off, so too the use of the medical system also does, and this has been reported in the American Journal of Managed Care. So for all these reasons, as a neurologist, as a physician, I go as far as I can go with any individual patient, if they're willing to listen, to let them know that this is the ultimate technique for prevention. And as we'll see from some of the other speakers, it has great utility, particularly for people at the student age. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kaplan, and all of our speakers so far for showing such incredible discipline, because they could each speak for hours, and I'm sure they would love to. I'm the only one up here that's really going on and on. I did want to mention, though, for some of us who are getting old, that the net effect of all of this deep rest and reduction of stress-related illness is increased longevity. And incredible studies, including a major study at Harvard University, showed a substantial increase in lifespan and also quality of life, and 12 years reduction in what's called biological age relative to chronological age. I mean, how old are you physically, as measured by many things like blood pressure, auditory threshold, near point of vision, and all these things that blood pressure. How old are we really compared to how old are we on our clocks? And there's a very, very substantial reduction in our actual biological functional age just through the regular experience of this profound state of consciousness, deep, deep state of rest. We've heard a lot of, at least a very concise presentation of a lot of research, and now it'll be a great joy, I think, to focus on some of the classroom applications and implications of this program. And the first of our speakers, who's really a remarkable educator and medical researcher, Dr. Serena Grosswald, is doing some extraordinary research at one of the premier schools in the country for stress-related learning disorders, including ADHD. Her recent research has been published all over the world, the International Herald Tribune, CNN, etc. Her research that promises amazing results on reversing stress-related learning disorders and ADHD just through the addition of the TM program within the educational setting. Dr. Serena Grosswald is an expert in cognitive learning. She is president of S.J. Grosswald and Associates. She is director of continuing medical education for the American Medical Women's Association. She is also now the project director for a major research study now underway on the effects of the Transcendental Meditation technique on ADHD and other learning disorders. Please welcome Dr. Serena Grosswald.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here to tell you a little about the research that we've been doing with TM and ADHD. We've had a couple of studies, and ADHD is the most common developmental disorder in school-age children. About 4.5 million children have been diagnosed with ADHD, and about 2.5 million of those children are on medication. And these are very powerful drugs. They're amphetamines. We're giving our kids speed. And as I mentioned, it is a developmental disorder, and as Dr. Aronander talked about, dial-up versus broadband. Well, these children are working at the level of string and tin can. It's just a matter of the fact that their brain is not quite as developed as their peers. But there's no objective clinical test for ADHD. The diagnosis is based on subjective inventories that are filled out by the parents and the teachers. And what studies have shown is that very bright children actually develop slower than other children. So who's to say that a 6-year-old who talks while the teacher is talking has got ADHD or is just developing a little slower? Or a 10-year-old who's got 130 IQ that doesn't pay attention in class, isn't very focused, who's to say that that child has got ADHD or is just bored? When I was in school becoming an educator, we learned that people learn differently. Some learn visually, some learn auditorially, and also that people progress at different rates. But schools and teachers are under a lot of pressure today to perform, to be in certain places at certain times in the school year, and there's no room now for any student that doesn't fall into the prescribed norm of how that curriculum is supposed to go. And so if a child is not paying attention or isn't on page 42 by week 6, then when that teacher fills out the questionnaire, does the child talk when the teacher's talking? Yes. Does the child have difficulty focusing? Yes. And the next thing you know, that child is diagnosed with ADHD. And there are a lot of side effects to these drugs. They cause insomnia. 15% of children with ADHD, diagnosed with ADHD and on ADHD medication, are also on sleeping medication. It can cause mood problems. Many of these kids are on antidepressants, antipsychotics. It can cause motor disorders. They go on medication for those things. These children are now on cocktails of medication, most of which are not approved for children. They're on adult medications that have serious long-term consequences. So we decided to take a look at what the effects of Transcendental Meditation would have for these children. Now, I will say that the medication does work for some children, doesn't work at all for some, and has severe side effects for others. That's the common general knowledge about medication. And so that's the case here. So for some children it does work. And if you're a parent of one of these children, it's very understandable that you want to do something for your child. You want your child to succeed. You want your child to be able to pay attention and learn in school. So the only option that parents know is to put their child on medication. But that's why we're here, is to tell you about a very effective alternative. You saw the brainwave coherence, little brains. Well, I'd like to show you what we saw very specifically in our children. And people ask me all the time, can a child with ADHD really sit down and meditate? Well, yes, they can do transcendental meditation. It's a very simple, natural, easy technique, and what we found was it was very easy for these kids. This is the result. We did our current randomized controlled trial. We're doing EEG measurements. And as Dr. Hagelin mentioned, this research is being done in the premier independent school for children with learning disabilities. So this school has a very high student-teacher ratio. They pride themselves on meeting the individual needs of the students, and they work very hard to help these children. They're very committed at that school. This is the control group, the group that did not experience transcendental meditation. And this is the result of the normal educational process at this very fine school. These are not individual heads, but rather they represent clusters of neuronetworking. So this is the increase in 3 months of the normal schooling that they're getting. This is the TM group. After 3 months, meditating 10 minutes twice a day. That's all they did, 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the afternoon, every day at school, and then at home on the weekends. And this is the increase in brain coherence that we saw just after 3 months. And what does that mean? It's very interesting, but what does that mean practically for these children? Well, what we saw was significant reductions in stress, and I did not realize that ADHD was a stress-related disorder. I don't think that's something that most people think about. But we saw 50 to 53% reduction in stress, 50% reduction in anxiety. These children are under a lot of stress. They're under stress to try to control their behavior, control their attention, control their focus, meet the expectations of their teachers and their parents. They know how to behave intellectually. They've been taught that. It's not that they don't know, it's that they cannot control their brains. They're not fully developed. And so when they impulsively hit the student next to them, then they know that's something they shouldn't do, and they feel bad about it. And it creates a spiral downward of their self-esteem, their stress, their anxiety. So what we saw was this significant reduction in stress, and from there, a cascading effect. And the teachers talked about anecdotally, they could see it in their body language. And the effect was that they were more open to learning. They were more responsive to learning. That instead of having to be told something 5 or 6 times, they only had to be told once or twice. So major reductions in all of those ADHD attention-related problems. We had improvements in attention, 19% improvement in expressive attention, 13% improvement in their overall executive functioning. In general, we saw improvements in their behavior regulation, in their emotional control, in their executive functioning, in their ability to monitor themselves, in their ability to inhibit their own behavior, their memory, their organizational skills. And we were not teaching them organizational skills. We weren't doing a behavioral intervention. We weren't helping them with their memory and their attention. These are the results that came spontaneously, 10 minutes twice a day. And I know that schools are pressed to try to fit in everything that they have to fit in. And we had one of the teachers of the last period that was concerned about losing 10 minutes in her class period, expressed that in the beginning. By the end of 3 months, she described the fact that, she said, in a 45-minute period, I might be effective half the time. She said for the student to come back from TM and be more focused, more attentive, sit down, get to work right away. She said now she maybe only had the child for 20 minutes, but she got more teaching done in that 20 minutes than she did in the whole 45 minutes before. So just 10 minutes twice a day. I'll just tell you a couple of very quick stories. Coming into this, I really didn't know for sure whether or not these children would be able to do TM. There's a lot of research about the benefits, and they tell me it's easy and simple, but I didn't know. So we taught all of these children in one day, and we sit down with a questionnaire to verify whether or not they are doing the practice correctly. So after the very first student learned, immediately after his first experience of meditating, I sat down with him and I asked him some questions, and I said, so how do you feel? And he said, I feel like it's a whole different world now. This child, for the first time, having the experience of having that silence of the mind, having his mind be able to settle down to that quietness that he never gets to experience. And some other children where we look at what are the effects of that CEO coming online. Well, 3 weeks into the study, one child described the fact that he could now recognize when he was getting angry. And he said he could walk away half the time. So 3 weeks into it, he could walk away half the time. In 3 months, he could probably walk away 75% of the time. By the end of the school year, it may not even be a problem. And again, just very simple. They don't have to think about anything else in the course of the day, just that 10 minutes twice a day. I could tell you a lot of stories. I would love to stand up here and tell you all these stories. But what I'd like to do is give you an opportunity to hear in their own words what these children felt about their experiences with TM. We did interviews before the children learned and then 3 months after. So I'll just let you hear it in their words. Thank you.
What I want to ask about is ADD, because part of what we're doing, we're going to teach kids who have ADD to meditate and see how it helps them. Mm-hmm. And so I want to get a sense of how ADD affects you. So, you have ADD?
Yes.
You know you got it?
Yes.
Okay. How can you tell?
Well, when I get frustrated, I get overly frustrated sometimes. When I can't do my work, I shut down too easily, and I sometimes just have problems overall working and just keeping my anger under control.
I can't sit straight, like sit there for a while and not fidget, and I can't concentrate for a long time, and I can get distracted easily.
Sometimes it's harder for me to read and pay attention in class.
Okay. And is that true at home too, or when you're trying to do homework? Or?
Yeah, trying to do homework is kind of tough too.
Well, let me ask you about, do you know what stress is?
Yes.
When you feel stressed, pressured, or tense?
I have a lot. I always have a lot.
A lot of stress?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about that. When do you feel stressed? How do you feel stressed?
It's mostly when I'm doing homework. Like I said, when I do something wrong, I could say I'm a lean, mean stress machine. It's helped me with my schoolwork, not getting as frustrated with my friends, and just not getting so angry with my parents, doing my homework better, not getting into so much fights at school, not getting people angry, and stuff like that.
It's kind of easier for me to focus and concentrate my energy on one thing than like going and trying to work on one thing and then fidgeting and trying to stop that and then listen to the teacher at the same time.
I'm much more calmer now than I used to be, and less hyper, and much more mature than I was. And Now they want, all my friends want me to come over their house.
Well, I don't stress as much anymore, unless it's like with my friends or whatever, but I don't stress that much anymore. So I'm basically, what it's doing is it's making me be able to focus so I'm not under stress.
It makes me a lot more confident in myself, because then I know that if I can't get a few things, I don't need to get stressed out about it. I just need to take a little time, go to something else, and then come back to it and work on it.
It's working, it's improving their lives, it's improving their sense of self, it's empowering them. I mean, I can say that over and over again, but I really do see it making a big difference, and I think that their futures are going to be so much brighter because of it.
Thank you, Serena, for your pioneer work on ADHD. It's really these children are the reason we do all of this. In that context, it's really a great joy to introduce our next speaker, who's a hero of mine, and perhaps the true pioneer in the subject of the application of meditation in schools. It's been 15 years, I think, or longer, since Dr. George Rutherford introduced the Transcendental Meditation Program into a public school in a very, very tough neighborhood, Anacostia in Washington, D.C., a city that's sometimes called the murder capital of the world, and probably the most difficult neighborhood in the city in terms of deeply stress-afflicted students from severe economic, lack of opportunity, and drugs in the environment in the neighborhood. Dr. George Rutherford is probably the most revered educator in Washington and the Baltimore area. He has served for 30 years as the principal of the Fletcher Johnson Educational Center, kindergarten through 8, in Washington, where he introduced the Transcendental Meditation technique to hundreds of students and teachers as part of the school's quiet time. He is currently principal of the Ideal Academy Public Charter School, also kindergarten through 8, in the District of Columbia, where a 2-year grant-supported research study, major study, is now underway on the effects of Transcendental Meditation on student stress, student behavior, and academic performance. Dr. George Rutherford.
Very good.
Good afternoon. You know, in life, God would always give you a special friend. And you know, at the Fletcher Johnson Educational Center, back in the early 90s and in the 80s, late 80s, Washington, D.C. was going through, but we were going through hell because of all the killing. The drugs that hit our city really was destroying our schools, our youngsters, and all. We knew at Fletcher Johnson Educational Center that we had to do something. I have seen young people laying on the ground shot up. But this particular morning, I was in my office, and the teacher had some students up in her classroom talking about death and dying, and was not able to bring closure to it. What happened to students end up in my office. And in talking to the young people, they shared with me, one stated their mother was found dead on Washington-Baltimore Parkway. One was telling me about their uncle being found shot. But the one that really, really made us turn around was the little girl who was my best math student at that school. Probably one of the best math students I ever had. She said, "Doc, say they came into my house, they kicked my door down, went upstairs and shot my uncle, and when my aunt came down the step, they shot her too. And that aunt was one of my former students. We knew that we had to do something. And as I stated earlier, God give all of us special friends. I met a gentleman in 1992 who became a special friend to Fletcher Johnson Educational Center. That gentleman is sitting there right now, Dr. John Hagelin. I was able to get some training, and I was able to go to Fairfield to see the school in Fairfield with Dr. Dean. And I'm telling you, it changed my life. I knew then I had hope. I knew then that I would be able to do something for my students back in Washington. Because in Fairfield, I saw happy children. You can go into a school and you'll see pre-K through kindergarten, and most times they are happy. But one student's getting first grade and on up, the stress that hit them. And it's not like it was in preschool and pre-K. Fletcher Johnson had 1,400 students, a little over 1,400, about 1,450. I was able to come back after seeing what I saw, got my training, and the amazing thing, I tell you, God is good. My teacher walked up to me one day and said, "Doc," said, "what are you doing?" Sort of insulted me, you know, "What am I doing? What are you talking about?" She said, "You're different." I said, "I am." Because see, I'm a very hyper person. And I told her what I was doing. She said, "We want that too." So again, I go to my special friend. And we were able to train 85% of the staff at the Fletcher Johnson Educational Center. Once we trained the staff, we sat down and made up our schedule for the next year because we wanted our students to benefit. I needed the staff in order to implement the program because it's one of me, but it was a whole lot of staff persons. I had the cafeteria workers, I had the custodians, I had the engineers, I had the teachers, I had the educational aides. So what we did, we looked at our schedule. I had 4 assistant principals. We looked, and the counselor, and we decided to take 5 minutes off each period. Once we took the 5 minutes off, we put 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon, and we call it quiet time. Well, we had a couple teachers that was concerned about taking class time. But after you look at it, you get 45 minutes to 50 minutes a class period, and I don't think you have a teacher in here can tell you that they use 45 to 50 minutes to teach a class. They don't have that time. They go through all the little bit of paperwork they got to do in the classroom before class starts. We wanted to make sure they got quality time. So with that 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon, see, Fletcher Johnson is located in southeast Washington, D.C. We're sitting on a hill looking down at Benning Road. Every day, believe me, every day I was outside stopping fights. But believe me, when we put quiet time in, I didn't have to go outside anymore. We trained our 5th graders, we trained our 6th graders, we had some 7th graders, 8th graders trained, and what happened, some parents came in upset about something, and we trained them too. At this junction, I retired, but right now I'm at the Ideal Academy Public Charter School. We have a 2-year study where all my 5th graders are trained right now, and half my 6th graders. In between Fletcher Johnson and Ideal, I went to Baltimore, but I had the opportunity to come back to Washington for the charter school, because in our charter, they had written a stress management program, a meditation. And I knew the lady, the founder. She is a long-time TM teacher. So she wanted me to come, and I wanted to come. So in 2001, I went to Ideal Academy Public Charter School. And let me tell you, folks, I have tried every program that you can name. I don't care what it is. You name it, I have tried it. Mediation did not work because some kids do not want to be mediated. You know that. That's the truth. We had every drug program you can name I've had in the school. Every tutorial program, you name the program. In 42 years, I have done it all. Believe me, I have done all of it. But I found out there's only one program you need in your school to resolve every problem you got. And that is Transcendental Meditation. We use it. We're going to have our whole school. We're in the 9th grade. We're going to high school now. Next year will be our 10th grade. Every student will be trained in Transcendental Meditation. I recommend to all of you, if we have any principals here, I know that you're having problem with No Child Left Behind. There's not a school district around that is not having problem with it. But I share with you, it will not be a greater problem as it is now if you have Transcendental Meditation. Most of all, we as educators, our responsibility is to change the quality of life for young people. Is that not true? We should be jumping on whatever program that has research behind it, that has proven that it can make a difference, instead of taking anything they bring to us. They'll bring anything into our public school, and we say, yeah, we'll try. All the reforms programs they have brought in have not worked because it will not meet all of the needs of our children. I ask you here in Boston to please do something for young people. And that something is, try the Transcendental Meditation. Try it. I guarantee you, you'll love it. Your students going to love it. They're going to be bright. I know the next speaker will tell you about his grade school, but I tell you, at Fletcher Johnson, we won Odyssey of the Mind 14 straight years. We even beat Sidwell Friends, who was one of the best schools in Washington. And my students were Transcendental Meditation students, and we had special needs students on that team. So I truly stand here to tell you that Transcendental Meditation is better than apple pie. Okay, thank you.
I could use some apple pie right about now. Thank you very much, Dr. Rutherford, for everything you've done for 42 years in education. It's very exciting also to introduce our next speaker, I think our penultimate speaker. Dr. Ashley Deans is the principal of the Maharishi School of the Age of Enlightenment in Fairfield, Iowa, a very unlikely place. And what he has done, incorporating Transcendental Meditation systematically into education, is really unprecedented, I think, in the world. Maharishi School was founded by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who is truly the world's foremost scientist of consciousness. and foremost Vedic scholar who revived from the ancient Vedic science of consciousness the meditation programs that we're talking about today, and encouraged scientific research on this fourth state of consciousness, the meditative state, and really sparked a revolution in science, where this subject of total brain development through meditation and the effects of meditation on health, yoga, all of that really came from Maharishi's efforts to revive the ancient Vedic science of consciousness and bring its blessings to India and to the whole world. Dr. Ashley Deans is a quantum physicist like many of us, a lifelong educator like most of you, and director of the award-winning Maharishi School, kindergarten through 12th in Fairfield, Iowa, where students and teachers both practice the Transcendental Meditation technique as part of its consciousness-based educational approach. The school graduates 10 times the national average of National Merit Scholar finalists, has seen 95% of its graduates accepted at four-year colleges, and has had grades 10 through 12 consistently score in the top 1% of the nation on standardized tests of educational development. All the more remarkable in that this school has a completely open admissions policy where any student really is accepted and encouraged to benefit from these powerful educational developmental technologies. He has done a phenomenal job, and we'll be hearing from him and some of his students. The valedictorians have come to share some of their experience at this school. Please welcome Dr. Ashley Deans. Oh, excuse me. Sit tight, Ashley, for a moment. I want to show you Ashley on national television. CBS Sunday Morning just aired a special feature on his school and his achievements. So for 2-3 minutes, if we could watch that, that'll introduce the school and our next speaker.
Images of meditation are all over our popular culture, and people seeking a higher state of being through its practice are all around us too. Our cover story is reported now by Mika Brzezinski.
No, this is not a still photo. Something is happening here.
It's a phenomenal experience.
This is the face of modern meditation, a kind of inner contemplation gaining mainstream attention, not just for spiritual enlightenment, but for its powers to heal the body, focus the mind, and relieve stress.
I could feel the change almost immediately.
In the most unlikely of places, in the small town of Fairfield, Iowa, this is the key to higher learning. Welcome to the Maharishi School and Maharishi University, named after the guru the Beatles followed. Remember Maharishi Mahesh Yogi? Well, here students practice his technique of Transcendental Meditation, or TM for short. It may not sound pretty, but I think some kids watching this might think, it's kind of weird. Yeah, kind of freaky.
Yeah. Well, if it makes you feel good, then what's the problem?
Yeah. It's just a natural experience.
Period at the end of the sentence.
Very good. Okay.
Along with the basics and the classics,
The more fool, Madonna, to mourn for your brother's soul being in heaven.
the younger kids do a walking meditation, while the older kids sit for 15 minutes twice a day. Each student has a personal mantra, a sound they internalize. Goal? To calm the mind.
I am somewhat hyper, and like if I have chocolate or anything, I like completely change. It's like actually not cool. And if I just meditate, I'm totally normal again.
What's a good example of sort of a great meditation experience for you?
Well, when I just let my thoughts about homework and boys and clothes just slip away, and it's just really peaceful. And then when you're done, you're more relaxed and you can deal with all your problems better.
I remain like really clear in activity and really efficient in activity. Like I have a lot of homework and I work after school, and I golf a lot and play sports, and just keeping up with that, I need to stay focused, I need to stay clear and centered, and meditation, that's what it does for me.
Think what you will, Headmaster Ashley Dean says the school's report card speaks for itself.
I've been here 15 years, and I'm amazed every single day at what these students accomplish. When I go to a tennis competition, they'll say, "Oh, you're a tennis academy." We've won 17 state tennis championships in the last 16 years. If I go to speech and drama, they say, "Oh, you're a theater school." We've won more of the top awards than any other school in the history of the state. We've won the American High School Math Competition 4 years in a row. We've won the Science Fair 10 times. We've won the Junior Science Fair 8 years in a row.
People listening, watching might say, come on, meditation makes these kids perform better?
Right, exactly.
Is that possible?
Yes. Well, think of what do most people think of if you want to send your child to a good school. Usually you're thinking they'll learn more. They'll learn more information, more facts, they'll work them harder. But what that creates is stress. It actually damages the brain physiology. What we do is something totally unexpected. We have the children do nothing, literally, for a few minutes in the morning and the afternoon. And what that does, it allows the mind to settle down to its quietest level. And just that experience enlivens the brain physiology and prepares them for activity.
Of course, there's no proof meditation makes you smarter, but Fred Travis, professor of psychology at Maharishi University, says TM helps improve communication between different areas of the brain.
You notice the rising and falling of the waves here, the rising and the falling of the waves here. And so we're seeing the front of the brain, the back of the brain. Being coherent, it means they're talking to each other. They're not doing separate things. They're completely integrated.
Is what you're saying is that most people don't have the front side and the back side of their brain in sync, and meditation creates that sort of relationship?
Not so much creates as strengthens. It's almost like going down to the gym. Mm-hmm. Instead of building up physical muscles, you're building up connections.
We've noticed that people are more thoughtful, take more time to decide how to react to people, how to react to very stressful situations.
Jeffrey Abramson, a partner at Tower Companies, an eco-friendly real estate firm in Bethesda, Maryland, says he offers free classes on transcendental meditation to his staff. Although TM classes typically cost $2,500, Abramson says it's worth it.
As we have found much more than the fact that they get sick less, and much more than they're more loyal and less likely to leave our company. Much more than that, what we have found is all aspects of their lives improves.
It's very hard to describe the feeling that you get. Quite honestly, you don't feel like you're going in 1,000 different directions.
And while more and more Americans are just beginning to discover its benefits, in Fairfield, Iowa, it's a way of life.
I just say try it, and if you don't like it, fine, don't do it. But people here, it's not like you have to do it. It's like you want to do it. It's something that you feel the benefits of so much that you just don't want to stop it.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here today at the invitation of the Massachusetts Committee for Stress-Free Schools to share with you some of the experiences that I've had over the past 15 years, where every student at Maharishi School practices the Transcendental Meditation technique, and so do the faculty and staff. And I just consider myself to be the most fortunate educator in America. I've served as president of the local area of superintendents, and when I go to their meetings, I just don't have the same problems that they have. While they're discussing what they're going to do about binge drinking or bullying, I'm worried about how I can build a sign big enough to contain all the achievements of the school without breaking the budget. It's a very, very different experience. And what has become clear to me is that it's not because we're better educators or we've been better trained. It's because when the student practices transcendental meditation, they actually unfold their inner genius from within. And so when you have a classroom full of students who are wide awake, eager to learn, and inquisitive, then naturally you're going to find that teaching is much easier. As Dr. Rutherford was saying, whenever you go to a kindergarten or first grade class, you'll find that children are happy.
And that's, I think, you'd find everywhere. They're also curious. They have an insatiable desire to know. This is a natural human ability to want to know more. And what is the difficulty that every kindergarten teacher has today is because the children are always asking why this and why that and why do birds fly south in the winter and where do the stars go during the daytime and how much force do I have to put on these curtains to get this rod to give way. All of the things that kindergarten children are doing, it shows that insatiable desire for knowledge that we all inherently have. But as you go up through the school, if you've ever taught to 10th or 11th graders about something and you get enthusiastic about it, and maybe if you're lucky a hand goes up and you say, yes, and they say, is this going to be on the test? The whole atmosphere is completely different. And education today is so fragmented that students go from physics to literature to art to math. All of the different disciplines are taught in a separated way, that this fragmented approach to knowledge leads to fragmented brain development. So even if you have a student who, by the time they go to university, they still have that desire to know everything, when they walk into the registrar's office, they might say, I want to know everything. And you see the registrar making a note, I have to talk to the admissions officer. What did they let this lunatic in for? Because they don't have anything to offer a student who wants to know everything. They would say, well, you'd have to do Psychology 101 or Math 101 or Physics 101. So maybe you decide to do literature. So you study literature for your bachelor's degree, and then when you go on to your master's degree, they'd say, well, you can't just study literature, you'd have to do French literature. So you do French literature for your master's degree. By then, most people have dropped out. Only 1 in 10 Americans goes on to get a higher degree. But you still persist. I want to know everything. So then you do your PhD, and they say, well, you can't just study French literature. You have to study just one author in French literature, and then between 1742 and 1746 from a Marxist perspective. And you realize you're learning virtually everything about almost nothing. And then when you get your PhD, they say, oh, now you're fully educated, you're ready to lead the nation. Well, obviously, we see the results of that. This fragmented education, as I said, leads to fragmented brain development. What the Transcendental Meditation technique does is it provides that technology that has been missing. When a student practices when a student is studying mathematics, it's developing one area of the brain. When they're studying literature, it develops another area of the brain. Art, another area of the brain. But when they practice transcendental meditation, as you've seen from the research, the whole brain functions coherently. It develops the brain holistically. The whole brain physiology gets enlivened. Then they can study math and physics, etc. And then at the end of the day, their brain physiology gets enlivened. And over time, the brain is so flexible that it is able to maintain that coherent style of functioning even while the student is focused on specific disciplines. And this is when you get a fully integrated student. An integrated student is not only one who excels academically, but has grown in moral reasoning, in creativity, in intelligence. These are things, there's no class offered in school today that increases your creativity. There's no class that is offered to increase your intelligence. You either are or you aren't. If you are, you go to Harvard. If you aren't, you maybe don't go anywhere at all. But what we need is this technology to unfold the inner genius of every student, because every student potentially has that infinite creative potential deep within them. I just want to give you a couple of examples from our school. We mentioned in the tape, they cut me off, of course, because I went on for a long time, so it was severely edited. I was only able to get a few achievements in there. But there's one I would like to tell you about. There's a creative problem-solving competition. It's called Destination Imagination. It's similar also to Odyssey of the Mind, in which we also compete. At Maharishi School, the students have won 46 state championships in these competitions. That's more than any school in the history of the state. Last year at the World Finals, Maharishi School won 2 World Championships and runners-up in 3 other categories, which was a better performance than every single school in Massachusetts combined. And I'm not saying this in order to annoy everybody today. I want you to be my friends. But I'm just saying it because I'm convinced that every single school can have the same degree of creativity and intelligence enlivened in their students, simply as a result of this simple technique. And at the same time, the technique reduces stress. So when the students are enthusiastic about learning, they're not becoming overly stressed. It's acting as a preventative measure for their health. The district nurse came around the other day and she just said to me, you know, it's funny, she said, the blood pressure of your students is so much lower than the blood pressure of the students at the surrounding schools. So we have high academic achievement, low stress, as Dr. Rutherford saw, happy students, and the most fortunate director in America. So I would like, now that you have heard this, to introduce a couple of our students who very reluctantly agreed to take a week off school and come and tour New England. And firstly, I'd like to introduce Amelia and Danielle Freeberg. Amelia was the captain of our basketball team this year and led them to the state finals. And Danielle is the captain of the volleyball team and the cheerleading team. They'll probably be the co-valedictorians if they do their homework during this week. And I'd like to invite them now to come and just briefly explain what it's like to be a student at a consciousness-based school. So, Amelia and Danielle.
So I want to start by reading you a quote from a book by Dr. Robert Mueller, who is a former Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations and a devoted peacemaker. Quote, "Happiness is total consciousness. Happiness is the peak fulfillment of life. It is not a part of nature or of the world. It is an attribute, an essence of the human person. Happiness is not our right. It is our duty as human beings." I think it is appropriate to start my speech with this quote from Dr. Mueller's book titled, "Most of All They Taught Me Happiness," because that title sums up the most important benefit that Transcendental Meditation has given me. When I meditate, I feel a deep sense of peace, happiness, and contentment within myself. Every day, this inner happiness grows bigger and bigger, and I fall more in love with life. When my life is infused with this inner happiness, life is a joy, and every aspect of it brings me fulfillment. It seems like education today, we've been hearing, is facing a lot of challenges, and it seems to lack the joy that I've been so fortunate to gain from my education. I feel so lucky to be in a school that incorporates this wonderful technique, which I believe and have experienced to be the key to success in my life as a student. Society often places too much importance on the outcome of education and forgets the value of allowing students to enjoy the process of learning. I think that this is one of the main factors that creates stress in students from such a young age. It is a mistake to believe that we as students have to sacrifice our inner happiness and peace in order to achieve success in life. I've experienced that having TM in my education has simply allowed me to enjoy the process of learning and really enjoy my life. Thank you. I'm Amelia. They introduced us as a unit, but we are twins, but we are separate people. So when I was thinking about giving this presentation, I reflected on the influence that Transcendental Meditation has had in my life. And I can sum that up in one word, and it would be stability. For me, Transcendental Meditation gives me a sense of solidity, like an anchor provides for a boat, to not get caught up in the whirlwind of my life as a student. When my mind settles down and transcends the stresses and strains of day-to-day life, I'm left in silence, which is an uncommon experience for kids to have in today's society. And my experience of this silence is not dull, it's lively and it's blissful. And when I'm finished meditating and ready to jump into activity, these qualities of silence and bliss and inner peace remain with me. And it's these qualities that give me the balance and the stability to not just enjoy my life not just survive my life as a student, but to truly enjoy and engage in each moment. And my peers, your students, we're the future of America. And I believe that any student that graduates with these qualities of balance and inner peace, they're not going to be the leaders of just the most powerful country in the world, but we're going to be the leaders of the most peaceful country in the world. Thank you.
Last week I had to go back to Fairfield because we had our 7-year accreditation visit. Those of you who are in private schools, you know what this means, that we had 12 people come and live with us basically for 3 days and ask us all questions. And at the end, in the exit interview, the head of the team, who I consider to be a fairly serious-minded individual, the head of a very prestigious private school in St. Louis, he said to me, "Your students are the hope of the world." And that was, I thought, indicated that he got it. He understood what we were about. And people have said that Maharishi School is the best secret in the world, so I wrote this book, A Record of Excellence, to document how the school functions. It has within it all of the scientific research on the brain physiology, on education, on health. It has interviews with the students, summaries of the achievements, and also really a deep insight into the technique of transcendental meditation. I'd like to introduce now another student, a junior at Maharishi School, Owen Stowe, whose father graduated from Harvard, and Owen was raised in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Owen has been at Maharishi School since his freshman year. He decided to move to Fairfield himself and live with a family in Fairfield. We've since started a boarding school so that more students can come. And Owen's hobbies are art and computers and music, and he'd like to explain a little bit what it's like to go from the regular school system to a consciousness-based system. Owen.
Hello. I almost feel as if before I came to the Maharishi School, I wasn't awake. Everything has blossomed for me naturally and spontaneously over the past 3 years. One example of this natural and spontaneous growth appears in my art. Before I came to MSAE, I was into art, but I only really sketched and painted here and there. However, very soon after I began at the Maharishi School, I started to meditate and started to meditate in a group. I began drawing every chance I got, even in class. Art became a huge part of my life. I'm now even confident enough to draw in front of other people without worrying about what they think of the drawing, even if the drawing actually is bad. Now everything seems to be easily within my reach. Another example of this is when I play music. When I first started taking piano lessons with my piano teacher in Iowa, he used to complain that I needed to play louder and more aggressively. I would almost never throw myself into the keys and put my heart into it, except when I played alone. However, now my piano teacher complains that I'm playing too loudly. I'm getting carried away with my playing, which seems to be a much better problem than putting barely anything into it at all. The real benefits of transcendental meditation aren't necessarily in any specific area, I find. TM develops skills that are necessary for simply living. Cambridge is renowned for its excellent colleges and academic atmosphere. At my old school, I would have received a much larger breadth of information. However, what use is that information if I don't know how to use it, or, worse yet, can't use it? If I'm so burned out by the time I get out of high school that I don't even want to think anymore, what use is everything I've learned? At the Maharishi School, I learned something even more important. I learned how to learn. I learned how to live, to interact. I learned everything I need to know to make my way in life. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to Dr. Ashley Deans, to all these beautiful students for very bravely sharing your experiences in front of this very august group of educators. Our last speaker is truly a delight, very, very extraordinary, perhaps one of the most accomplished and revered educators in our country. Mr. Ralph Wolf is the President and Executive Director of the Accrediting Commission for Senior Colleges and Universities of the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, WASC, which was responsible for the accreditation of hundreds of colleges and universities on the West Coast. He is an extremely diversely accomplished and multi-talented individual. He's been a law professor and Dean of the Graduate School of Education at Antioch College, a delightful, innovative college in Yellow Springs, Ohio, and last year was elected as a Fellow of the World Academy of Arts and Sciences. He has devoted the past 30 years to exploring the power and potential of many diverse educational initiatives, and over the past few years especially has become a very, very dynamic national proponent of the use of Transcendental Meditation in the schools to prepare students for the information overload and information explosion they will inevitably face in college, and to prepare them for a successful, fulfilling life. Please welcome Dr. Ralph Wolf.
When your last name is Wolf and you're from Wask on the West Coast, you're used to being the final speaker. I'm delighted to be here. I actually took a week off work to come and be part of this tour to speak to educators at the K-12 level. Most of my life is spent speaking to people in higher education, faculty, administrators, presidents, academic vice presidents. They're usually my cup of tea. The reason I'm here and speaking to you is because of the importance of the work you do to prepare students for the colleges and universities of this country. And I'm here to talk about the end of the pipeline and what your graduates will face. Every major study that's been done in the past 10 years of every socioeconomic level in this country, parents believe that higher education is the single most important thing to allow their children to participate in this democracy and to be successful, particularly economically successful. So let's talk about the preparedness of students and what happens to students when they get to the colleges and universities of today, and why I'm speaking about TM. Over 25% of students who enroll in college as freshmen self-declare in recent surveys that they're on antidepressant drugs. Every person I know that I speak with thinks that's an underestimate. Those drugs are, as you might well imagine, shared among other students as well. The Harvard Public Health School of Public Health for the last decade has been doing studies of binge drinking. Their definition of binge drinking is 4 drinks in an evening, at least 4 nights a week. Now, they went out and studied, and they've done several of these studies over the many years, of every institutional type in the country: community colleges, 2-year schools, 4-year schools, selective liberal arts colleges, there's many of those here in New England, major institutions. Across the board, they find 46% of the men, 44% of the women are binge drinkers. Now, we've seen the brain research on the impact that binge drinking has on the brain. I do a lot of work with student services personnel, deans or vice presidents of student services. There is no program on college campuses today that effectively addresses this problem. And I've worked with many: freshman orientation, theatrical programs, dry campuses, you name it. We work with every one of those. This is a serious problem. Now, the way I would say is that there is a hole. We've seen a hole in the brain in terms of learning that affects these students. I also have to say we're under enormous pressure in higher education, as are you, to focus on learning outcomes. And so we put a great deal of attention in the accrediting process, as I'm sure many of you experience, as if your school is accredited, in learning outcomes. There was a recent study, the National Assessment of Adult Literacy, administered every 10 years, reported on in every major newspaper in the country, because its results were very discouraging. There were instruments that, tests that were given to balance a basic checkbook, to read a map, to read a short piece of prose, and to interpret it. only 31% of college graduates, including those with graduate degrees, were able to operate at a proficient level. So there is a learning deficit. We have a, if you will, a social adaptation deficit among students in colleges and universities today. We also have what I'd call an ethical deficit. Just a recent study I read from the Josephson Center, which studies ethics for many years. It's the leading research institute on ethics. In a 2004 survey of high school seniors, 25,000 high school seniors, 98% felt being a person of high ethical conduct was really important. 90% were satisfied with their own ethical standards. At the same time, 82% admitted they had lied to a parent about something significant in the last year. 62% had lied to a teacher. 62% admitted to cheating on a test. 22% stealing something from a relative. 27% stealing from a store. 54% had hit someone in anger in the past 12 months. Now, in higher education, the way we would address that problem is we might offer a course somewhere in the program in the 4 years of college, or actually it's now 6 years, that most students take to graduate. But the way I like to see it is that all of us, there's not just the need to promote learning. I'd like to say there's a hole in the heart as much as there's a deficit in our ethics and our learning. There is a longing for students to develop high ethical conduct, to be good learners, and to be effective citizens. And it's becoming more and more challenging. If you know of the flat world that Thomas Friedman wrote, this is an issue of global competitiveness. It's one that's very serious to all national policymakers. UCLA conducted a study last year. The Higher Education Research Institute conducts a study of all freshmen. You may read occasionally of the values of freshmen, 350,000+ students that they survey. Last year they did a study of 150,000 students in colleges and universities about their spiritual values. And what they found was that over 70% of these students are longing for spiritual meaning. They're looking for that, and that's one of the reasons they go to college and what they're looking for. It's not something that is automatically provided in a college education. Now, I myself had my own experience about transcendental meditation that I'd like to share to explain why I'm here today. It's been a long journey for me. In 1979, I was a law professor at the University of Dayton, teaching in the law school there. And I'd never heard of the word meditate. Somehow it had passed me by. I think I may have heard of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, but not something that registered significantly for me. I was asked to be on the accreditation evaluation team of Maharishi International University, now called Maharishi University of Management. And when I went out there, we were provided a blue volume then of scientific studies. We were part of I think it was an 8-member team of the North Central Association to accredit the university. And I was astonished by the quality of the interaction in the classrooms, the interaction between and among students and the faculty of the classroom. It frankly did not compare at all to anything that I had experienced before, having taught at the undergraduate or graduate level. I was so impressed that after an appropriate time and after the accreditation had been granted, I came back and I learned how to meditate. I will say I had my research assistants look up all the available research why I shouldn't learn how to meditate and what was available against it, what a good academic should do. Could not find any. I did learn how to meditate, and I had really quite a powerful experience from the very first day. And I practiced meditation for 25 years and never talked about it. My friends, my family knew about it, but I never talked about it in my professional life. Instead, I've been in higher education 35 years. I've spent that time focusing on innovation in higher education. I have set up a law school. I set up the Antioch Law School, set up many bachelor's, master's, even doctoral level programs. I've also closed a number down. I've worked with the main researchers in the country, published, led workshops on portfolio-based learning, competency-based learning, outcomes-based education. I'm sure many of you in your classrooms are dealing with very many of the same innovations. Collaborative learning, active learning. All of these are very powerful learning techniques, but as Bobby said earlier, at the surface level, they do not build the character and the capacity of our students from the inside out. And over time, their impact is not as profound, is not as significant as we as educators would want. I've gone all around the world studying innovation. In 2004, I had the privilege to work with the government of Hong Kong, studied all the universities there. Last year, I was in Europe, studying education there. And I say to you that, and this is something that academics don't often do, because we often don't believe there is a single thing that will make a significant difference. But I say to you, there is one thing that will make a significant difference. I have read the research. I've talked with the researchers who've done the research. It's done at the premier universities in the world. I have seen it and personally experienced it in my own life and in the institutions where TM is practiced. Recently, in the San Francisco Bay Area, I've had a chance to interact with a group of students who are also in a study on ADHD and have seen the impact before and after meditation. So I'm here to say that before it's too late, before students get into college and face the challenges that they will inevitably face in colleges and universities today, it is really important to consider introducing TM in your school. It will make a huge difference. I've seen it in my life, I've seen it in institutions. And I would say that there is real value to doing it in groups. There's so much peer pressure. I've certainly seen it with my children. There are so many distractions, and if teachers and students can meditate for 10 minutes together, what a huge difference it will make. Finally, I just want to say why I am so passionate about this. Last year, I had the privilege of attending the international conference of the World Academy of Arts and Sciences, to which I had just been elected a fellow. It was in November in Zagreb, Croatia. There were scientists, legislators, politicians, social scientists, people from all different walks of life in this academy from all over the world, meeting for a number of days. The title of the conference was The Future of Knowledge. There was a panel, one of the most controversial panels, on the future of the human being. There were 4 people on the panel. 3 of those people spoke about a future of the human being that was quite, I will say, chilling, but remarkable. One of the panelists spoke about the pharmacological future, or that's not the right word, the drug-oriented future of what it means to be a human being. He talked proudly about having been on Ritalin, having a son on Ritalin, and how important it is to use chemicals in the brain in the same way we use diet, cosmetic surgery, or the like. How coming online in the next decade there will be a number of drugs that will increase intelligence, do all different kinds of things. No discussion of side effects. There is a drug now available, FDA had just recently approved, he described, called Provigil, that is now being used by helicopter and fighter pilots to allow them to stay awake for 48 hours. Wonderful for cramming for exams. This is just one of many. Another panelist talked about exoskeleton, all different kinds of things you can do. There was an ethicist on the panel, but you know, ethics is not something that's only in the brain. It was really too little too late by the time he talked about it. I came away completely convinced this is not the future I want for my children. It's not the future I want for kids who are in school, that some get access to these kinds of cocktails of drugs and others do not. But for me, the future is to build the capacity of the learner from the inside out, where the ethical responsibility comes naturally and spontaneously because of who we are as human beings. TM does that. I've seen it. I urge you to consider it for your schools. Thank you very much.
When I stepped to the podium an hour and 45 minutes ago, I suggested at that time that we had a wealth of information, some very profound speakers. As I step to the podium now, I'm humbled. I think of William Jennings Bryan starting his speech with, "I would be presumptuous indeed if I were to present myself against this distinguished gentleman to whom you have just listened." And it does shock me with the profundity of knowledge that was presented here today. I'm a public school educator. I received my undergraduate at Westfield State, my graduate at Fitchburg State, my doctorate at the University of Massachusetts. I started out as a fourth grade teacher in Portland, Maine. I worked in the developmental disabilities clinic with the Fitchburg Mental Health Clinic, a private disabilities clinic in Fitchburg, special education director, director of pupil personnel services, and assistant superintendent of schools. I had the experience last week, a week ago, right at this time, 2 o'clock meeting, where I sat in an IEP meeting, and the teachers looked at my wife and I and suggested that our 9-year-old daughter be evaluated for ADHD. As I look on our profession, and I look at the knowledge that is within our grasp, I'm awed. I felt very comfortable in looking at my well-intentioned teachers and saying, no, we have a different idea about this. This child who you look at as being inattentive, we look as being very, very creative, energized and enthusiastic. We also recognize that June 1st, she turns 10. And I says, our remedy and our intervention will be transcendental meditation. You cannot imagine the reaction that we got. But the school psychologist comes running up right after that. That is so good. He says, I wish other people had this knowledge. Dr. Rutherford posed to us a challenge. He did it in terms of an invitation. As a public school educator, you as public school, private school, and parochial school educators, welcome that challenge. We have an organization that will stand beside you and with you to integrate this knowledge into your schools. It's an extraordinary opportunity. I'd like you to take advantage of that opportunity. I'd now like to introduce Bob Roth, who I introduced momentarily, like I said, a few hours ago, to finalize and conclude today's presentations. Thank you.
It's extraordinary that a problem of stress and the need to develop the brain that's so modern would have a solution that's so ancient, that's so human, that's just so who we are and how we're built, that's accessible for every child, no matter what their educational or economic background. This has been an absolutely remarkable afternoon. Thank you all very much for coming.